Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. Also, check out Off the Floor. We're getting closer to 1,000 members on there. Why? Because you get the most Heat content there. And it's on 10 different channels, but additionally, stage shows right after the game. Look, you don't want to wait for the podcast. You can jump on, give your opinion right there. We've got our whole crew is on there, and we pop in there from time to time, more than time to time, actually, and we give you the latest information as we have it. Also, a little bit looser than we do on the podcast or on Twitter. So check it out. It's Off the Floor. Use the link that's in here in the description. Click all the way through, pay the $2.99 for the first month. You can cancel at any time, and you will bypass the Apple upcharge. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes our friend Eric Rubenstein. We're going to get him on there. Huge Heat fan, 877-829-ERIC. That's 877-829-3742 or ericrubenstein.com. If you're injured in a car accident, this is the guy to reach. Based in South Florida, went to St. Thomas University, graduate magna cum laude. He's from Lauderhill originally. He knows the entire scene down here. Everybody knows Eric. And you'll find him at all the Heat games. Huge Heat fan. You can find him also at his Instagram at Attorney Rubenstein. If you don't know what he's about, check out the IG, Attorney Rubenstein, and you'll get his sense for his sense of humor too. But he's serious about getting you your money. So check it out, ericrubenstein.com, 877-829-3742. And now, today's episode.
Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust.
You sound scared.
It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. The Miami Heat are now back at 500 on the season. They are 21-21, coming off a terrible home loss to Portland. They are in Milwaukee right now, or at least they should have arrived by now. Jimmy Butler is not. And that's what we're going to talk about again here today. He has been suspended again by the Miami Heat. This is the second official suspension that's been levied by the Miami Heat, another non-paid suspension. The first one, of course, was 7 games after his prolonged absence, purportedly due to an illness. Then, of course, he came back. He kind of lollygagged around for 2 games, spoke after the second of those games that he had lost his joy. The Heat suspended him for 7 games without pay. They met with him to bring him back. They brought him back. He's played in 3 games since. He had, I believe, what was it? The first game he had 18 points, but didn't do really anything else. That was a win. A lot of this has been obscured by the fact that Kel'el Ware has popped lately, or maybe the Butler situation has obscured that. I'm not sure. But there's really been 2 different storylines going on with this team right now. One is happier to talk about. He had 18 points in the first game. The second game, I thought he actually played better. He was more engaged. He had only 8 points, but he did have 7 assists. And again, he seemed to be more into it. And this last game, which everybody was atrocious, Hero didn't play, but Jimmy seemed particularly disengaged, particularly on the bench. I mean, I took people think I'm like
that photo is it. People,
people think I'm cherry picking it, Greg. That was literally
you didn't Photoshop that together. You don't have those kind of skills.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is where my lack of technological skill should be in my favor, because there's no way I could have done anything to doctor that photo while I'm sitting on press row. I can hardly get the thing posted. And okay, I chose it over photos that looked worse, because I knew that I was going to get accused of cherry picking something to make Jimmy look bad. There was no way to make Jimmy look good. I watched him on the sideline for pretty much the entire game. There wasn't much to watch in the game. Okay, we sit behind it. Okay, we sit up on 107. You can see the entire Heat bench. I did not see him engage in a single huddle. I did not see him interact with Bam in any way on the sideline. Not that he does that a lot typically. I saw him have some conversation with Kevin Love, Terry Rozier, a little bit with Niko Jovic, and that was pretty much it. Okay, he would do some mild golf clap type applause while everybody else on the bench was up during certain sequences. Like Larson had that like ridiculous kind of wraparound where he got fouled at the end of the game when the Heat were making that ultimately pointless comeback. But, you know, the young players and Duncan played hard, at least during that stretch of the fourth quarter, to get back in the game. Jimmy was the only one sitting down. Okay. I'm sorry. There's no way to make it look good at this point. He looked totally disengaged from the team. Now, that is not, to my understanding, why he got suspended, though. It's just more of this. He doesn't want to be here. This came after the report prior to the game that Phoenix was going to be trading. It's coveted. Again, we talked about that. I really understand why this is so coveted, but it is supposedly, this is the pick du jour in the NBA. The 2031, the golden pick. The 2031 golden, what is this? Feels like a Harry Potter episode or Game of Thrones or something. It's unprotected 2031. They're going to be awful by then because we can predict the future 6 years from now. This 2031 pick, they traded to get 3 other picks from Utah, which basically Utah owns a ton of picks from a bunch of teams because they've done their own kind of tear down, just like OKC did, and New Orleans has to a certain degree. So they had these 3 picks, and Phoenix gets sort of the lesser, not sort of, they get the lesser, the worse of those 3 picks, but that allows them to then split up these picks, perhaps. So it's sort of like taking a pizza pie, and somebody doesn't want the whole pie, right? But maybe they want a couple slices. So this is Phoenix's way of getting a couple slices to possibly send to this team or to this team. It may be 1 slice in each. Okay, to give to this team or this team or this team to facilitate some type of a bigger trade. So anyway, this happens before the game yesterday. And I thought maybe Jimmy's going to get pulled off the court because they may trade him during this game, in which case you don't want him turning an ankle or any of the other various injuries he's had over the recent years, a knee, getting sick, any of this kind of stuff that's going to pull him off the court. Of course, that didn't happen, but he didn't play the fourth quarter anyway. Neither did Bam, by the way, who is getting off scot-free during all of this. He's been awful during most of this stretch. And that better correct itself when Jimmy's gone because we have let him off the hook to a large degree, and he has not acquitted himself well during any of this in terms of his performance on the court. Kel'el Ware is outplaying him. Now, there's no way around it. And so he doesn't get traded. But then today, my big question was, is he going to be on the flight? And so I asked that question of 3 different Heat people today, and nobody texted me back. And I don't know if I've suddenly become annoying or unlikable. Maybe that happened a long time ago, but typically I will get some kind of a text back. I got nothing. And then the report comes out from Shams that Jimmy did not make the flight, that he planned on flying up later today, and the Heat decided to suspend him for 2 games. Now, Greg, I have told you that, and I've told our audience, that the Heat did not believe they could continue to suspend Jimmy Butler unless he did something clearly wrong. They knew that their 7-game suspension, which took them to the end of that road trip, was as far as they could push it without having to pay him. And that essentially he had to do something else wrong, and then they could get the league behind them. So they felt like they would be in the right to suspend him, to at least give them the breathing room to make a trade. It appears that they have found this. Now, of course, the spin has already come from the other side that Jimmy, and I know this was reported, it was Ira who reported this initially, I believe, that Jimmy didn't know what time the flight was or always planning on going up later. And of course, there were those other reports about how Jimmy always flies or often flies separately. He doesn't often fly separately. He has flown separately at times. It is not something that the team has necessarily been in favor of all the time. It was not just the finals series against Denver that this was happening. And this is where a lot of the misinformation is getting confusing people at this stage. But Greg, to the point, they were looking for, I think, another transgression. Like they sat down with him and they said, look, we're going to try to trade you. He had the meeting with Pat. He had the meeting with the Arisons. He said, I want to be traded. I don't want to be here anymore. Okay, there's no fixing that. There's no extension coming. There's no extension he's going to accept. Okay, the relationship is severed, but we need to make it official by finding a trade partner here or finding a way to get you. If you want to get to Phoenix, fine. We need to find what we want in some kind of a trade. So they have the conversation with him, and they basically say, but you need to act like you're part of the team while you're here. And if you're part of the team, you fly with the team. Like,
Yeah.
I don't.
Everyone else got there. And like, that's where, when we talk about the Heat looking for a reason to suspend him, I don't think it was necessarily that. I think if he showed up and he was there for the flight and got on the airplane and flew to Milwaukee, they wouldn't have suspended him, but he wasn't on the flight. And I think that there are likely policies in place that maybe have been kind of, relaxed with Jimmy at certain times. And Jimmy was going to try to get his way, thinking that this is an extenuating circumstance with the relationship between him and the team right now. And the Heat are not having it. And they're like, if you're not going to fly with us, it actually, is probably against some sort of team policy. You don't quote me on that, but I'm guessing that that's the legs that they have to stand on. I'm glad that you started with so much kind of context as to how we got here, because as we're talking about this, the Heat have yet to actually release a statement about what Jimmy Butler's suspension is. I think it's important to just to note that Sham's tweet says that they're planning to suspend him for these 2 games, but the Heat haven't released anything yet. So we'll see ultimately what the suspension is for. It's probably for missing the flight, but there could be other things that are going on. Because the minute that Phoenix got more picks, I think that this really starts to point towards Jimmy thinking that there's a resolution coming. We start to hear different things. For me, I've heard that like Sunday is a date that like they're trying to march toward to get. And, coincidentally, that's the end of this road trip, that like you'd like to get this wrapped up by a date like that. I don't think the Heat were looking for a reason to suspend him necessarily, but I also don't think it's the worst thing for this group to get out on the road and get Jimmy Butler away from them. So it may be like, from a just pure basketball perspective, it may be a blessing in disguise that they don't have that with them on the road trip, but the Heat got to get something done here. Like, it's not fair to the players in that locker room to continue to do this and let this linger for much longer and expect them to keep this above water. I don't think it is.
Well, you're right. There has been no official suspension yet. That's true. And I think that ideally, you would have preferred to trade him before having to suspend him again. Like that would have been the best case scenario. But
Yep.
the problem is, first thing, you have to like what you're getting in the trade, but this is also a complex trade. It's very clear it's a complex trade. This is not a one team to one team. The salaries match. Let's get the physicals done. Let's get the players exchanged. Like that's this kind of deal. There's all these different teams that could or will be involved. We've heard not it's already Phoenix and Utah, but now we've heard Toronto, we've heard potentially Chicago, we've heard Milwaukee. I've heard New Orleans could still slip into this in some way. So there are all of these other teams, and then there are other teams that may try to get in at the last second, and these things are fluid. We've talked about how Jimmy Butler got here in a fluid situation. A deal fell apart with Dallas because something was misheard on the Mavericks side, and so they had to change that deal and essentially give a first-round pick to the Clippers to get the deal done, because they were so far down the road at that point, and they didn't want to lose Butler after they tried to get him the previous season when he was still in Milwaukee. So all of these things kind of play into it, and it's not an easy transaction in any way. And so because of that, I think that the best case scenario, was to keep him around, hope that he could contribute in some way to winning, which clearly is not going to happen. He doesn't want to contribute to winning here. At this stage, I don't think he cares about it at all. He doesn't look engaged. He's doing just enough to not get suspended. And then this was the report that came out from Bobby Marks. It's not even a report. This is just the I don't lie, right? I mean, Bobby Marks has nothing against Jimmy Butler, okay? All right? The camera in the sky does not lie, read Jimmy Butler. From ESPN Stats Info and Second Spectrum. Attempted fewer than 10 field goal attempts in 4 of the last 5 games. 5-game stretch with no more than 57 points, 42 field goals attempted, and 14 free throw attempts. The last time that occurred was in 2013 versus Portland. Oh, no, excuse me, versus Portland. This last game. He moved at a fast speed more than 14 feet a second, 5% of the time. His second lowest percentage in a game in which he played at least 20 minutes this season. He took a shot on 14% of his touches, third lowest percentage in a game this season, minimum 50 touches. He passed the ball on 76% of his touches. He was unselfish. There's no question about that. He didn't want anything to do with the ball. Tied for the second highest percentage in a game this season, minimum 50 touches. Tyler didn't play against Portland. What's the excuse?
Shout out
What's
to
the
Bobby
excuse?
Marks for doing some work for someone in the Heat organization that they don't have to go digging for that data that Bobby Marks so eloquently presented it to the public for them.
I guess Heat lifer. I mean, he does show up at some of the Heat games. He lives in Naples, but no, he is not. Bobby, as you know, is not. He's a former front office guy, yes, okay, but he is as straight a shooter as you get in these types of situations. But I also know that he has respect for the Heat organization, and I mean, again, don't piss on our leg and tell us it's raining. Like he's not playing hard. Like you and I talked about this before he came back, and this was the way to kind of put the Heat in the most uncomfortable position, was to like do just enough to be out there to report, but not really contribute in any way to the greater group or to winning. And I know he said that, he doesn't have anything against these guys, okay, that he's with, but I mean, he's not aiding their cause in any way
At
by
all.
playing like this. And so I look, do I know for sure that the Heat were looking for him to miss a flight so that at least they could separate from him? No, I don't know that. Have I heard that they've been happy with the way he's played? No. Okay, so him missing a flight, and I know that it came out. There was some stuff from those around him, and it came out on social media that he didn't know when the flight was, or that they changed the flight time because they didn't practice. I knew last night they weren't going to practice. Like I left the arena last night, and because I would have gone to practice today, I cleared the time. I said to Alex and Brady as we were leaving, I'm like, they're not going to practice because they don't want to be available to the media. They're not going to practice officially. They can do the individual workouts, but as soon as they have an official practice, they have to be open to us. They don't want that right now. Spo won't even mention Jimmy's name. He literally will not mention Jimmy's name. So go ahead.
You said on the pod last night, the next like almost milestone in this would be, is Jimmy Butler going to get on the flight? You actually, I mean, we got to go clip that actually, because you actually said that. And now we're at a spot where Jimmy didn't make the flight. And then I think that this gets completely confusing, even more so when Chris Haynes brings out this report about Milwaukee not being a destination for Bradley Beal. Because as we've been connecting dots, that's felt like kind of a landing spot for him. So there's a lot of stuff swirling. And I think that maybe just Jimmy Butler was in a spot where he thought he was going to get the concessions made that have been made to him. And they're saying, we're not doing that bullshit anymore.
But Greg, why would they make more? I want to get to the Haynes report and to Gambo in a second here, because the Beal part of this is very interesting. Why would the Heat make more concessions to him now than they did before? Why? I mean, the relationship is over. Like they don't have to like them catering to him, and I don't think it was smart in retrospect. Okay, obviously it blew up in their face. All right. But them catering to him, like when they were trying to keep him playing at a high level to go win a championship. And by the way, catering to him included extending him at the max exactly when he asked for it the last time around, right? So they paid him the most amount of money they possibly could while he was actually here. This is all about future money. This was not about what he's getting paid now. He's getting paid the most he can get paid now. As much as they could have maxed him, they maxed him. Okay. Why would they be more lenient with him now after all of this has happened and he has reiterated a million times he wants out the door, and the things that he has said publicly have not necessarily aligned with those that his friends and others have pushed out there? Why would the Heat suddenly say, oh, no, we'll fly separate? Like what?
Yeah.
Like
they have no incentive to do that. Like that's like when a relationship is strained, you have to read the room to a degree and understand what's going to happen. And so it's kind of weird that you would have maybe, not just Jimmy Butler, but those around him that are, informed of the decision making. Like to miss that flight, you'd have to understand that if you communicated outwardly to the Heat, they probably would tell you, no, you need to make that damn flight. And so it just probably seems more to me like there was a total lack of communication communication there. He just wasn't on the plane. And guess what? Everybody else got on the plane. So this whole thing of like the Heat trying to okey doke him into missing a flight to set him up, like that's just nonsense. I saw that on social media today. Like, and I know it's a very loud minority of people that kind of bring that kind of stuff up, but he should have just made the flight. And this is a situation where it works into the Heat's favor, and then the drama goes away for a couple days, and you just have to hope that they can find a damn deal. And that's like the next part of this that we're going to get into, because like we said this earlier, and I'm going to reiterate it again, and then I'll hand the ball back. They're doing a real disservice to this team and these players and this head coach right now, letting this crap linger. And I know that 2-6 eventually will come, and probably the right thing to do is to take it up until you get the deal you want. But this is really impacting the product on the court in a big way. And I don't mean product in a cold-hearted way. I mean, like every aspect of the basketball and the human element of it, it's completely blown up in everyone's face, and they got to get this over with.
They're starting a 20-year-old at center. Okay. And this is absolutely not the impression they want to create for someone who may end up being their next franchise player. We don't know. Okay. I mean, they've got, and I know Jovic has a relationship with him, but he's 21. Where, as I mentioned, is 20. Tyler is 25. Jaquez is what, 23. I don't know if all these guys are going to be part of their future, but like if they let this stuff go now, like again, it's one thing when like it's Jimmy lead us over the finish line, but now it's like Jimmy ain't leading you anywhere. They know it. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be here. And I have not been as far along as you as just get it done. I've been more you can't make a bad deal here. But I am at the point where at a certain point I would be okay, and it's not my money, but just saying just send him home with pay at this point. Like just I don't think he can play for you anymore. I just don't. I that atmosphere, the arena was nasty too, and I don't mean like nasty to him. I just mean it was like everybody's on edge with this stuff now. It just looks uncomfortable. It's like somebody being at a wedding who you don't want there anymore and doesn't want to be there, but he's just there, right? He's just there because he's like Uncle Johnny and he was great this day and he knows everybody there, but he's I'm not going to get into more analogies on this because then other people are going to say I'm criticizing Jimmy. But and the other part of this is that it drives me insane is that he had such a great tenure here, and he did so much more than they expected. And I go back to his original press conference, and he hit the right notes for most of the time that he was here. It really was, and it's just, and now for it to descend into this, and I can't even have the conversation with these folks on Twitter like, well, Pat failed him or Pat should have spoken to him. Yes, all of those things are true to a certain degree. There's elements of truth to all of it. But the way that this has played out since December, there's just no excusing any of it. There's no taking his side against the Heat for what has played out since then. I don't think so, and I think the majority of fans and the casual fans I think are there too. I don't think it was just right. I think they've come around here recently, and I'm sorry, I don't have that much influence. For people that think you and I have that much influence, you guys are poisoning the fan base.
Powerful. Him wearing Phoenix Suns shoes is more powerful than our podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely.
The colors of the Suns, not Phoenix Suns brand.
Although we do, I mean, I'm literally wearing There's Always Money on the Banana Stand t-shirt here for Arrested Development. I ain't that powerful on anything. I just want to read one thing here, and then we'll go to the other side of the break and talk about how they might actually resolve this. But thank you for reminding me to clip the part about the next flashpoint is whether he makes the flight, because that was pretty obvious last night. And again, if I knew there was no practice, the guy getting $48 million should have known there was no practice. Right. Okay. So when I just passed this along to somebody else on this claim that he had the wrong time on the flight, that's hilarious, but a bold-faced lie. I absolutely know that's a lie. And this is somebody who would know. So
and that's that.
And that's that. All right. Anyway, on the other side, we'll talk about how they may actually be able to resolve this at some point. I think you should just try to find the money in the banana stand. All right. Check out our great sponsor. They'll find your money in your house, literally, without having to burn it down or anything like that, like happened in Arrested Development. RealEstateShopFL.com. That's RealEstateShopFL.com. Reach out to Javier today. They will find the way to get you the most money for your house. If you're buying, if you're selling, Broward County, beyond Broward County, the entire Tri-County area. We've had Javier here on the podcast. Javier, by the way, is a big Drew Smith fan. He was the one who said he should be playing more earlier in the season. So not only is he great at selling real estate, but also he knows a whole lot about the Heat. So reach out to him. It's the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram or Real Estate Shop FL.com. These are the realtors, again, that you want to reach out to if you want an honest, straightforward experience, and they know the local market. They're from here. They know everything about Broward County and the like. So follow them at Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram or Real Estate Shop FL.com. All right. Here's where we are with some of the other stuff on this. So we mentioned that Phoenix has picked up these 3 picks. Bradley Beal, depending on who you believe, because it's not just on the Butler side that there's these conflicting reports. It's on the Beal side. Now, Beal's agent, we've mentioned this before, is Mark Bartelstein. Mark Bartelstein's son happens to work for the Suns. Bartelstein, at every opportunity, has come out and said Bradley Beal's not just going to waive his no-trade clause for anybody. It would happen again today. He has to say that. It's his fiduciary responsibility to take care of his client first, not the Suns, okay? Mark Bartelstein is a longtime NBA agent. The Heat have had many dealings with him throughout the years. I mentioned some of the clients. I think Chris Gatling, PJ Brown, Brian Grant, a whole bunch of guys have been Bartelstein clients who have played for the Heat over time. They're very familiar with Mark. He plays hardball, okay? And they had a conversation with Mark about Beal's no-trade clause when there was a possibility of Beal being traded to Miami last offseason, okay, or the offseason prior to this one. Okay. But there's reporting out of Phoenix, particularly by Gambo, who's a radio host up there, who does seem to be very well sourced. He has been in front of all the stuff in Phoenix consistently, going back to the Beal trade last year, which is when I started following him. He says that Beal's willing to waive the no-trade clause. He basically called it ridiculous or BS or something, whatever Bartelstein's report is. And so essentially, I guess he's saying that Bartelstein is just kind of covering this thing up, and ultimately Beal will waive his no-trade clause for more teams than are being suggested at this point. Beal, I guess, Miami doesn't want Beal. But I know you want to ask me a question related to that. So I'm going to let you put that in your pocket, and you can ask me that one as we go here. But there is a possibility, I think, of Beal ending up in Milwaukee. That there was a chance he was going to end up there the last time. And I also, because they're desperate. They're desperate.
You calling Haynes out? You don't
they
think
have to keep Giannis. I'm not criticizing Haynes' reporting. I know, but I still think there's a chance of that. And then the other team that's been mentioned repeatedly is Chicago. I know Detroit was at one point, but that's died down. But Chicago, because Billy Donovan coached Beal in college, and they don't seem to want to go totally backwards. So seems like they want to remain relatively competitive here. So I still think those things could happen. But you wanted to ask me a question about Bradley Beal, so I'm going to try to give you an answer.
Yeah, so the question essentially is, and I posed this in our Discord, everybody needs to go there for the most heat anywhere off the floor. Shameless plug. No. So now that the Phoenix Suns have 3 picks, is there any world where they circle back to Miami and they say, would you take Beal for Butler, and we'll give you all 3 picks? And is there, from your perspective, any appetite or open-mindedness to essentially, committing to, I think, close to $57 million in a player option for that 26 offseason that we've been thinking you'd clear the decks for, is getting 3 picks, 2 of which you can pretty much guarantee are going to be towards the back of the first round, worth it to just, take Bradley Beal back? Because one place we know he'll waive his no trade clause is to Miami. I don't think that that's going to happen. Obviously, Haynes really came out and was strong tonight, saying that he won't go to Milwaukee. So it's like, now you got to find the other teams that are interested. Chicago's one. I'm interested to see if somebody else doesn't pop up in the mix here. This seems like an opportune moment because it looks like it's going to be a really big trade. Like, I asked you that question kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, because for me to think that this is going to be a 2-team deal is naive. No. It's probably going to be a 3, 4, 5-team deal. So, but I just was interested. I'm interested to hear your perspective on if that draft capital is enough? And then like ultimately, what other teams are out there that could sneak in for Bradley Beal? Like the list is small.
The list is small, and the answer to your question for me is no. Now, whether the Heat would do it, I don't know, but I don't think so, based on them saying repeatedly that they would not take Bradley Beal under any circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume that would include the circumstances of getting 3 likely late first-round picks. To me, there would have to be a plan to move those first-round picks, or at least a couple of them, for someone else to make this make sense, because you're going to be taking yourself out of 2026 summer by doing this for a player who, again, if we were having this conversation 3 or 4 years ago, it would be a different conversation. I'm not saying Bradley Beal's a bad player. It's just pretty clear he's on the back end of this thing. I don't think it's just role. I feel he used up a lot of his minutes on bad teams in Washington, carrying the offense. Winning has not ever seemed like the most important thing to him. I just don't think that this makes sense, beyond the fact, again, that they've said he's not someone they'd be interested in. I think that what they need to do, okay, and whether this deal out there is out there or not, is it's pretty clear now that they're going to be a young team. Okay. They're leaning into where they have a lot of money committed to Bam. Tyler is their leading scorer. You're talking that's 20, 27, 25. Jovic is 21. Jaquez is, 23. Larson is, 22, 23.
Yeah.
You're talking about 6 players. Haywood Highsmith's on a cheap contract. He's not 30 yet. So that's 7 guys. And I know they like Kashad Johnson. Okay. So you're talking about, you've got 8 potential rotation players. Andrew Smith, who is an older player than we saved, but I think he'll be 27 by 28 by next year. You're talking about 8 or 9 guys under age 30. Now, is there a superstar there? No. Okay. I mean, maybe Ware is in 5 years. I don't know. But okay, Bam is not a superstar. I think we've seen that. Tyler is not going to be a superstar. I think he's an all-star this year. And so the search if you don't have one of those guys, they talk about this all the time. You got to do what you can to find one of those guys. They obviously have not had a lot of luck finding one of those guys while they've had Jimmy. They're going to have to find one without Jimmy, okay, at this stage. And they should have a little bit more money to work with to be able to do that without Jimmy's money there, which is the reason why I initially said just let the contract run out at the end of the year and take the flexibility. But he's made this thing so impossible, okay, that I've come around a little bit more to just getting something done by February 6th. Okay. But again, if they didn't, you send him home with pay, then you just let it run out. Go ahead.
Here's the next question.
Yes.
With Phoenix gaining these picks, and I ultimately think that with the 3 picks that they gained, they're going to have to use one of them to entice someone to take Bradley Beal. And I think the other 2 may be earmarked for Miami to get the deal done to get Jimmy Butler to Phoenix. Again, some of me is speculating on that, frankly. Do you think the Heat have an appetite for maybe taking back one less pick if they take back less salary and they reset their luxury tax clock by getting underneath the luxury tax this season or as soon as possible? Do you think that is something? Because I think it's actually maybe an opportune moment to take advantage of this big, robust trade and try to take back. Like maybe you do have to take back a player who's committed for beyond next season, like a Chris Middleton or something like that. But if everyone else is expiring that you bring back, maybe you get under the tax just enough and you reset that clock. I think the Heat may be willing to sacrifice a draft asset for that, but I was interested in your perspective.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I think if they can reset the clock, it would be beneficial. I know fans will just jump on there just trying to save money. But there are, again, tactical advantages to resetting those clocks and also getting as far away from the second apron as you possibly can. It gives you more flexibility going forward. Flexibility does matter. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to cash in every time, but it does matter. Now, I think, to me, the single biggest thing they need to do in this trade is not take money beyond 2026. That to me is unless there is a player that they are absolutely certain they want to be there beyond 26. I'm looking at some of the players out there, and to me the litmus test here is how you feel about Zach LaVine, because Alex and I have talked about this quite a bit, and there's been talk about LaVine ending up in Milwaukee, LaVine ending up in Orlando. LaVine's having a very good season. He makes a lot of money potentially beyond 26. If you believe that he could play next to Tyler Hero, that he would defend in a way that his athleticism suggests he should, but he never has, then I think you could you could talk yourself into Levine if as you look at the list of players in 26. Do I think they will talk themselves into that? No, I haven't gotten that impression. But that's kind of where I'm at. The other name, to me, would be Brandon Ingram. And to me that depends on how diminished his stock is right now, because he wanted $50 million a year, and New Orleans laid down the law with him. Now, has Brandon Ingram quit the way that Jimmy Butler has quit? No. He also hasn't accomplished the things in the NBA that Jimmy Butler has, but he hasn't quit. He's also 27 years old, not 35. He has more of his career ahead of him probably than Jimmy does. Now, he's had an ankle injury. He's had some other issues this year. He's only played 19 games. He's actually played less games than Jimmy has. But I don't think he's getting anywhere near what he wanted before. So could you acquire Brandon Ingram and work out an extension for you that is a little friendlier? And he's on the same clock as these players. He is 27. His skill set would fit in the front court with Bam and Ware, I think, very well. That's one of the reasons why I lean more towards him than Zion, even though Zion has the higher upside, because I'm trying to figure out how a Zion, Bam, Ware front court would work. I could figure out
Weird.
right. Weird. I mean, I could figure out how an Ingram one could, but to me, that's another of the sort of litmus tests. Do I think either of those things is going to happen? No. I think the more likely scenario is they take a stopgap player on a deal that doesn't go past 26, like say a Chris Middleton, which is somebody we've talked about, who could do some of the things Jimmy does, not as well. Okay. Yes, I'd give him his number. Absolutely. Okay. You gave Lowry Dragic his number, and Dragic never quit on the organization. So I would say it's like the Middleton Portis thing to me. If you end up getting, at least the one pick, I would say you take the pick. You go for the pick that's sooner. The 25 draft is a very good draft. I think you'd rather have the pick.
There's arguments
sooner.
that the 2027 pick unlocks more for the future for Miami, so that might
true.
be the other one.
That's another thing to consider. But I think just from yes, that's accurate. But as far as a talent perspective,
You're right.
Jimmy Johnson had this philosophy, and I've always agreed with it. Okay, which is that it's worth a round, and in the NFL is a little different because there are 7 rounds and all the rest. But like, it's worth a round to get the pick a year earlier. So like, he would trade like, let's say if he was in the NFL draft. Okay, he did this for Pat Surtain. He ended up trading up to get Pat Surtain. He gave up a future second. A future first to get a second. Okay, that you would rather have a second round pick now than a first round pick the year after, because you get the extra year of the player in your system. Okay, now it's an NFL philosophy, but I agree with it in the NBA too. I'd prefer to have the pick sooner. Plus, Pat's going to be 80. Okay, and I know that you're in a different time window if you're not on Jimmy's clock. But I think you want to accelerate this time window. Tyler and Bam are entering their prime, okay?
Mhm.
Conceivably. We hope Bam gets back to it.
You just
Tyler's
need one
not
of them
quite in it.
ones to add to them.
That's it. So to me, the thing is, I would prefer to get the pick sooner. So this is not a rebuild. We know they're not going to do rebuild, but it's more of, as you've talked about, a refresh, a reload, and you get the pick sooner. So I think if you could get a 25 or a 27 first round pick, you get contracts that don't go past 26, and you maybe get one additional asset, I think I'd be comfortable with that. I know they're trying to swing bigger than that, but to me, that's where it's at. I don't think you want to jeopardize your flexibility beyond 26. And I also don't think that you have to come out of this with some kind of a pick, because I think either to use it to replace what happened with Rozier, in a trade situation. Okay. And we've talked about having to unlock these picks and OKC and all the things that go into this. But additionally, I mean, what are you best at right now?
Mm-hmm.
Drafting. And so to me, that where the pick is, like this idea of, well, you got to get it from a bad team so it's in the top 10. The Heat believe they can take a player at 20 who's every bit as good as somebody else is going to take at 10. They've
Correct.
proven that.
And they'll do it at 30 with the people who are getting picks in the teens.
Right. So to me, I'd rather have the pick sooner, even if it's later. And I think having the pick asset makes sense. I think people are going to be disappointed with the Jimmy return, but some of that will be pinned on the organization for not trading him sooner. We can have those conversations.
I'm excited for a new era.
That's where I'm at too. Because I will say this. The hardest thing for me to watch yesterday was not him on the floor, but like he catalyzed this group.
Mm-hmm.
He made them believe that they could win big. And we can talk about whether the front office squandered that or not, but you went into playoff series believing you had a
You had a
guy
chance with
who
Jimmy.
you had a chance with Jimmy, and he was going to drag his teammates with him. And instead, he's dragging them down right now. And that is it's just to watch him disconnected on the sideline, not engaged in the huddles, not wanting to be out there. He's just there not to get fined. And basically, the Heat are saying, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to fine you anyway. I know, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like this is we're watching like a bad workplace breakup, like in real time here. It's like a slow moving car crash,
And it's good for our download. So for us to be saying we want it to be over, folks,
yeah.
that says something.
I'm not enjoying it anymore. I'm really not. The back and forth is too transparent at this stage, and it's just you know what was enjoyable watching Khalil Ware and these other guys play basketball against San Antonio, but to expect them to sustain these are guys new to the NBA. Like this drama is new to them, and then they got to go out there and concentrate. And we should be selling. Like Ware just had. I know he did some things that were not great in this last game. Okay, but what do you have? 20 and 16 in his first NBA start, and like nobody's paying any attention to it. Like
Brady's
I'd rather they.
heartbroken. He wants it to
He
be
is.
about
He
the
wants to talk
basketball.
about the games.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm fine with it. I'm fine. You know, you get this thing over with. We'll talk about the players they bring in. Then Brady and Alice could do 25 straight X's and O's pods about how Tyler's going to find a Ware in the pick and roll for lobs and all the rest of that stuff. I'm fine with all that. That's all good. All right. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be something else tomorrow. If there is, certainly if there's a trade, we'll break in with coverage. But we just want to give you sort of a overview on everything that's gone on over the past 24 hours. The end of the story here is Jimmy Butler is not going to play in Milwaukee. He's not going to play in Brooklyn. We'll see if he's still a member of the Heat after all of that. I will be here for the post-game shows for both of those road games, so catch us on those as well. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.